Do you love Night Falls, California? Do you want to know how we make it? Join us for Breakfast at the Redwood, a new show where we take you behind the scenes for an in-depth discussion with the show's creators. Episode 1 is available now on nightfallsmedia.com. Thank you all so much for being patient as we've created more content for you. Your support means the world to us. And now, welcome back to Night Falls, California.
If you were a motorist driving through the town of Night Falls, it's extremely likely that you would spend a fair amount of time driving on Main Street. Like in most small towns, Main Street is the backbone of the community, full of storefronts, government buildings, and homes, many of which are as old as the town itself. Starting from its westernmost point overlooking the ocean and following the road east, these buildings, and indeed civilization itself, eventually give way to a dense forest that was once the lifeblood of this small burg. Follow the road as it winds through the trees for long enough, and you would eventually arrive at your final destination, the lumber mill. Abandoned for years, it sits atop a small waterfall, the very same geographic feature that Night Falls owes its name to. Though the mill itself has stood abandoned since 1962, the surrounding area has become a popular spot for hikers, nature lovers, and people just looking to get away. This is due in large part to the numerous logging trails that, their original purpose long gone, have found new life as hiking paths. These paths have remained largely unchanged since their creation, with many still utilizing the infrastructure that was built in the 30s to help move timber. The most notable of these pieces of engineering was, and remains to this day, Shadow Creek Bridge. It is on this bridge, deep in the forest, that everything is about to change. While I and so many others across town stare at the sky as ash impossibly falls from nowhere, a discovery is about to be made at Shadow Creek Bridge. A discovery that will challenge everything we thought we knew to be true and shake the town of Night Falls, California to its very core. My first interview of the day is with Richard Nellis, Chief of Police for the KFPD. When I arrive at the station, I have to spend a few minutes searching for a spot to park my car. The station's small lot is absolutely full, and there's a line forming out the door. After a fruitless search, I give up and decide to park on the side of the street a few blocks away. As I make my way back, I can't help but look at the long line of people waiting to get into the small one-story building and be reminded of clowns getting into a tiny car. It'd be funny if most of the folks in line didn't look so panicked. I get into the back of the line and patiently wait my turn. A few minutes pass, and I make no progress. I look at my watch, worried. My meeting is scheduled for 10:30, and it's nearly 10:25. I look towards the door. The line shows no sign of moving. After a moment of wrestling with my conscience, I take a deep breath, get out of line, and start walking towards the door. Almost immediately, I'm besieged by a torrent of expletives and general shouting from the people in line. Embarrassed, I avoid eye contact with everyone, waving and mumbling a string of general apologies. Sorry, I have an appointment. I'm really sorry. Excuse me. My trip from the back of the line to the front office of the station takes 15 seconds at most, but by the time I get there, I feel like I've run the gauntlet. I stand awkwardly for a few moments as the officer manning the front desk finishes her conversation with an older couple who seem to be adamant that some local kids are trying to set the forest on fire. As they walk away, the officer gets ready to call the next person in line when she sees me standing off to the side. "Can I help you, sir?" she asks. "I hope so," I reply nervously. "My name is Scott Sinclair. I have a 10:30 appointment to interview I'm cut off by a booming voice from the back of the office. "Is that my 10:30? It asks. A tall, uniformed man approaches the desk. He has short salt and pepper hair and the most stereotypical cop stash I've ever seen. I start to respond, but he cuts me off, pointing at me saying, "You, come with me." The officer at the desk presses a button, and the gate to my left swings open. I quickly grab my recorder and begin to follow.
You picked a hell of a day to schedule an interview. Weird shit starts falling from the sky, and all these small-town hicks think the whole damn world's about to end.
Is it all right if I record this?
Sure, I don't care. You're a reporter, right?
Yes, sir.
Who you write for?
Freelance at the moment. This is sort of a pet project, I guess.
Weird subject for a pet project.
Well...
you do you, man. Right in here.
In one quick motion, he grabs a doorknob on his right and pulls. As the door swings open, he motions me inside. The room is small and featureless, aside from an old wooden table and two folding metal chairs, one placed on each side. He flicks a switch, and the old fluorescent tubes hanging from the ceiling come to life with a buzz, bathing the room in a harsh white light. I sit in the chair nearest me and begin to set up my equipment as Chief Nellis slams the door shut behind him. There's a brief moment of silence as he stares at me. I feel like I'm about to be interrogated.
Well,
what? The chief slowly walks over to the chair opposite me, removes his cell phone from his pocket, and places it on the table. He very deliberately pulls the chair out, its legs shrieking as they drag across the concrete floor. He sits, then scoots his chair forward, getting closer and closer with each squeaking motion. He looks me in the eyes, assessing me.
tell me everything you know. No bullshit. I'll know if you're lying.
Before I even have a chance to respond, he bursts out laughing. I sigh, mildly amused but mostly exasperated. Whether he knows it or not, Travis Warren seems to have a kindred spirit in Chief Richard Nellis.
Oh, you should have seen your face. I swear. Oh, you look like you were going to shit yourself. No, I'm sorry. I just really needed that. It has been a morning.
If you're busy, I can come back another time.
No, please. I need the break. All morning, I've just been repeating myself. No, there's no fire that we're aware of. No, you're not in any danger. No, I don't know why the sky was full of ash this morning. I feel like a damn robot.
It certainly is strange, though. I thought it was snowing when I first saw it.
Well, that would have been better. Easier to explain. Global warming, folks. Whole world's gone to hell. We're all gonna die.
That's a bit extreme.
Yeah, but it would shut them the hell up.
The chief wears a giant grin on his face as he says this. I'm having a hard time telling if he's serious or not. Something tells me he's not entirely sure himself. I'd like to get started by talking a bit about yourself.
Jumping right in, huh?
If you don't mind.
Nah, you're good. Keep me on track, please.
How long have you lived in Night Falls?
Most of my life. Family moved here in the 80s. I was 10, so it would have been 86.
Where are you from originally?
Los Angeles.
And what brought you here?
My old man was a cop. 15 years on the LAPD. LA in the 80s was a trip. The city was changing. My dad didn't like what it was changing into, so he finally decided it was too much. And he got out. Moved us here.
That's a pretty drastic change. From LA to a town as small as Night Falls?
Oh, yeah. And it was even smaller back then.
Did you have a problem with that?
At first. It was the usual kid problems. Leaving friends behind, going to a new school, that kind of thing. As I got older, though, I started to appreciate the fact that I didn't need to worry about whether or not my old man was going to come home every night. And years later, I asked him about how things were before he left. I heard some real horror stories. He always said that him leaving L.A. boiled down to one basic thing. He signed up to be a cop, not a soldier. That really stuck with me.
I assume he was the reason you joined the force?
You bet your ass he was. I wanted to join as soon as I graduated high school, but he told me he'd preferred if I went out and got some life experience before I made a decision. So, went off to college, took my sweet time getting my criminal justice degree, went through the police academy, and I got back in time to work with my dad for one day. It was my first day at the station, was the day of his retirement party.
Sounds like it worked out to be kind of a ceremonial passing of the torch.
That's pretty much exactly what it was. It was neat, honestly.
The chief smiles as he thinks back on that day. He may have a peculiar sense of humor, but he clearly loves his job. I could sit here all day asking him about his life and career, but I am here for a reason. Would you mind if we started going over the Cooper disappearance? He coughs as he readjusts himself in the chair, attempting to put on a face that says, let's get down to business.
Yeah, I guess we probably should, huh?
It is the reason I'm here. No offense to you personally, of course.
Oh, no, none taken.
Did you know the Cooper family before Charley disappeared?
Oh, sure. Nancy Cooper worked at the Redwood. Saw her all the time. We'd always talk about how her kids were doing, how business was going, whether I'd arrested anyone that day. Typical small town small talk.
Would you say you were friends?
Well, we were friendly. She wasn't about to invite me to any family gatherings, but we'd strike up a conversation if we passed each other on the sidewalk.
Were you ever aware of any problems between her and Charley?
No. If Nancy has one defining characteristic, it's that she loves her family, especially her kids.
It's funny. The way she's been described to me, I'd assume there was always tension between her and her daughters.
Now, what gave you that idea?
Just talking to Sydnie and Travis.
The thing you need to keep in mind is Sydnie has had a lot of growing up to do in a very short time. With Charley and the accident and everything else that's happened, she never had the chance to leave town and live her own life. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of resentment in there because of it. Travis, well, he's got his own set of issues.
He shakes his head as he mentions Travis. Surprisingly, his face seems to show a sense of compassion and pity, rather than anger and animosity. I'd like to get into the investigation itself, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
Were you assigned the case, or did you volunteer for it?
Well, I was assigned to it. It was 3 years after I was promoted to detective, which, honestly doesn't mean jack in a department as small as this one, but still I was the most qualified. I'm sorry. And give me a minute.
The chief stands as he answers the call. He turns his back to me, seemingly more out of habit than as an effort to obtain privacy, as he makes no effort to lower his voice.
Nellis? Yeah. No, I'm busy. I'm here with the, All right, make it fast. Whoa, wait, whoa, back up. Say that again. Are you shitting me? I swear to God, if I get up there and find out you are playing some sick-ass joke, I will personally take your badge and shove it. Are you absolutely certain it's her? All right, I'll be there as soon as I can.
Chief Nellis returns his phone to his pocket and turns back towards me. His face is pale. His good-natured smile is gone. He looks like he's seen a ghost. Is everything okay? He shakes his head slightly, seemingly trying to snap himself back to reality. He looks me dead in the eyes. He wears a stone-cold expression befitting of the chief of police.
Your story just got a whole hell of a lot more interesting.
On August 27th, 2019, at approximately 10 a.m., Charley Cooper was found unconscious on Shadow Creek Bridge. Two hikers, Lucas Hoffman and Carrie Zimmer, were taking a romantic nature walk when they spotted what looked like a dead body laying in the middle of the bridge. The police were called, and Patrol Officer Raymond Daniels was dispatched to investigate. Due to the general disorder around town caused by the sudden appearance of ash falling from the sky, Daniels did not arrive at the scene until approximately 10:30, just as I was beginning my interview with Richard Nellis. After taking down the hiker's information, Officer Daniels went over to inspect the body. It was at this point that the truth made itself known. The corpse that Hoffman and Zimmer had discovered was in fact not a corpse, but a living, breathing, albeit unconscious, Charley Cooper. She had aged 10 years since anyone had seen her last, but it was unmistakably Charley. Daniels briefly attempted to revive her, but was unsuccessful. He proceeded to call an ambulance, then the chief. The chief is kind enough to briefly relay this information to me as we walk out of the police station. As I follow him out to his car, recorder in hand, I wrestle in my mind with what I'm about to ask. I feel like it isn't my place, but I don't think I'll ever get a chance like this again. I came here for a story. Here it is. And so I ask cautiously, Chief, do you think it would be possible for me to tag along? I promise I won't get in the way. The chief stops as he reaches his car. He looks back at me. He has the same piercing look in his eyes as when we first stepped into the room where our interview was held. Once again, I feel like he's assessing me, but I have a pretty good feeling that whatever he says next won't be a joke.
Shit. All right, you listen to me. You don't say shit, you don't touch shit, and you don't do shit until my crew and I have had a chance to do our jobs. You get me?
Yes, Chief.
I want you to stay at least 20 feet back from the scene. If that means you're stuck behind a tree the whole time, tough shit.
That's fine by me.
All right, last thing. Call me Rich, all right? None of this chief shit.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, it's great. Good. Now get in, shut up. I gotta make some calls.
On the 15-minute drive to Shadow Creek Bridge, Rich makes no less than 6 separate phone calls. I do my best to mind my own business, but I can't help but notice that the last call he makes seems to be to Travis Warren. I'm only able to catch one side of the conversation, but from what the chief says, it appears that life is about to get much easier for Travis. As Rich finishes his phone call, he slows the car and pulls off to the side of the road, parking just behind an ambulance and a squad car belonging to the Night Falls Police Department. Looking out the window, I see that we're completely surrounded on all sides by dense clusters of trees. Ahead and behind, the road appears to curve and slither along like a snake before turning and disappearing into the greenery. As we exit the vehicle, a slight breeze blows. The ash stopped falling from the sky this morning after about an hour, but a large amount of it seems to have gotten trapped in the treetops. The wind shakes the branches slightly, and a small amount of ash begins to fall from them. I feel a chill run down my spine. It was a strange sight to begin with, but here in the forest, knowing what I'm about to see, it's downright eerie. I follow the chief across the road and over the railing that separates the asphalt from the forest vegetation. As I climb over the railing, I realize that it looks brand new, at least compared to the road itself. I look down the road in the direction we drove up from. It stretches ahead for about 120 feet before turning sharply. I notice one of the trees, a sequoia much larger than the redwoods surrounding it, looks mangled and scarred at its base. I think back to my conversation yesterday with Charley Cooper and shudder. She was right. Even from this distance, I can still see the gashes in the tree where they pried her father's ruined car loose after the accident. I feel a pit in my stomach as an overwhelming sense of dread washes over me. I close my eyes and breathe deeply. For a brief moment, I swear I can hear cars speeding down the road, the screeching of brakes, the crash of metal. But when I open my eyes, there's nothing. Fighting the unpleasant sensation in my stomach, I turn and realize I'm being left behind. A quick trek through the undergrowth brings me to my destination. By the time I arrive, Chief Nellis has already gone to work. Remembering my promise, I search for and quickly find a fallen tree approximately 50 feet back from the action and make myself comfortable. I know the chief told me I only needed to stay 20 feet back, but I don't want to press my luck, and so I sit, taking in the scene before me. On my left, the chief is speaking to a man and a woman. They look young, barely in their 20s. The man, who I assume is Lucas Hoffman, is noticeably upset. His forehead shines with sweat and his hands fidget as he speaks. The woman, presumably Carrie Zimmer, is quite the opposite. She is calm, almost expressionless, save for a mild frown as she watches Lucas speak. I see her roll her eyes, though it's hard to gauge whether it's at Lucas himself or because of something he said. Ahead of me is Shadow Creek Bridge. It isn't exactly what I expected. I had this image in my head of an ancient, menacing, forgotten piece of engineering hidden away in the forest, ready to collapse at any moment. But seeing it in person, it's really just a bridge. Though it was built in the late 30s, it's clearly been well taken care of. The wooden planks that run along its 25-foot length look freshly stained and sealed, and its metal frame shows no sign of rust. Honestly, the only thing about the bridge that seems out of the ordinary is what is currently taking place on it. Two paramedics crouch next to a figure on the bridge, a small stretcher between them. Officer Daniels stands nearby, watching. After a brief exchange of hand signals and softly muttered words that I'm too far away to clearly make out, I hear 1, 2, 3, and watch as the medics smoothly lift the figure, Charley, off the ground and move her onto the stretcher. Then, just as smoothly, they go to either end of the stretcher and begin carrying it away from the bridge, escorted by Officer Daniels. They make their way back towards the ambulance, towards me. As they approach, I feel my heart begin to race. I do my best to seem like I don't notice them, to seem inconspicuous. I don't do a very good job. As soon as I see Charley, I hear myself let out a gasp. I'm embarrassed. I shouldn't be surprised. I knew what I would be seeing when I asked to come up here. Officer Daniels shoots me a look, but he passes by without saying anything. I'm sure he had the same reaction when he first saw her. The next hour passes by in a blur. More officers arrive on the scene, which is quickly taped off. Pictures are taken and the area is combed for clues. The chief finishes speaking with the hikers and begins walking the perimeter of the scene, his eyes narrow and laser-focused as he looks for anything that his team might have missed. Eventually, the chaos begins to wind down. From my vantage point sitting on the log, I can tell that nothing of interest has been found. One by one, the officers disperse. Soon, the chief and I are alone in the forest. He stands on the bridge, staring at the spot where Charley was laying. He slowly paces the length of it several times, trying to find anything that might tell him what happened. His efforts are apparently unrewarded, as he walks off the bridge, shaking his head. He makes his way towards me, his hands in his pockets and his head hanging low. As he gets closer, I try to think of something to say, but I'm unable to find the words. It's probably for the best, I decide. The man walking towards me seems like a totally different person than the one who was laughing and joking with me only a couple of hours ago. He walks past me and says quietly, almost mumbling, "Let's go." Silently, I turn and follow him back to the road. The ride back to the station and back to my car feels incredibly long. I look at the chief, wondering what it is he saw at the bridge that's made him so dour. Perhaps it was something he didn't see. I don't feel like it would be in my best interest to try to get it out of him right now, and so I sit, silently watching the trees go by. I arrive back at my room and immediately go to work transferring audio files from my recorder to my laptop. I try to begin editing, but I'm unable to focus. Everything's different. Until this morning, Charley Cooper was dead to the world. I never wanted to accept that, but there was always a small part of me that had come to terms with the fact that it was probably true. But that's all changed now. I stare at my screen. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. 10 years of theories, hypotheses, discussions, and research, none of that matters anymore. When I chose to look into Charley Cooper's story, I had assumed that it was finished. I could take as much time as I needed poring over clues, searching through the maybes to find the truth. That's all backwards now. Everything I thought I knew to be true has been uprooted and cast into a void of uncertainty. My mind is flooded with those images from long ago. The pictures, the newscasts, the articles, #what happened to Charley. The girl whose face I had resigned myself to only ever seeing in photographs is real. She's alive. My stomach rumbles, snapping me back to reality. I'm immediately aware that the light in my motel room looks different somehow. The sun is going down. But how? I haven't been here that long, have I? I look at my watch. It's nearly 7 o'clock, and I haven't had anything to eat since breakfast. I suppose I should pay another visit to the Redwood. By 7:45, I'm in a booth at the Redwood Diner. The plate in front of me is empty, save for a few crumbs and a stray dollop of ketchup left over from my cheeseburger. I sit for a minute or so, people watching. The evening crowd is decently large, filling most of the tables and booths. The laid-back, cozy atmosphere is preserved, however, aided greatly by the valiant efforts of the waitstaff, who, despite their small numbers, are attentive and efficient, attending to the needs of every diner with speed and a smile. Watching them work is almost like watching an intricately choreographed dance. One dancer seems to be missing, however. Sydnie Cooper. As my plate is being taken away, I ask if Sydnie's working tonight. My waitress informs me that she was supposed to be, but called out due to a family emergency. I thank her as she walks towards the kitchen. I suppose I have one more stop on my itinerary tonight. On a hunch, I make my way to Night Falls Community Hospital. As I do, I place a call to Sydnie Cooper. Sure enough, she's spent the entire evening with Charley. I ask her if it would be all right if I paid her a visit. She agrees, though I sense a slight hesitation in her voice as she does so. I can't blame her. This day has been a whirlwind for me, so I can't even begin to imagine how it's been for her.
It doesn't feel real, having her back after so long.
Charley's hospital room is small and sparsely decorated, with a table and 2 chairs being the only things present to offset the cold and slightly menacing atmosphere. Charley sleeps in her bed, an oxygen mask over her mouth, and a multitude of IV drips, monitors, and wires clustered around her. I sit with Sydnie at the table, which has been positioned near the foot of the bed. Between us, on the table, a modest bouquet of flowers sits in a vase. Sydnie does not face me. Instead, her eyes are focused on her sister. How is she doing?
Good, I think. She's been unconscious since they found her, but they ran what tests they could, and she seems stable, for the most part.
For the most part?
She was super dehydrated, and apparently her breathing was weak when they brought her in. They took some chest x-rays, and the doctor said her lungs look like she's been smoking 3 packs a day for the past 10 years.
Do you think she has?
I can't imagine how else they would have gotten that way, but I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. She hated cigarettes. It was the only thing she and Travis would ever get into arguments about.
I'm not sure if Sydnie realizes it, but I can't help but notice Travis's name passes her lips without hesitation. Before, she could barely bring herself to talk about him, let alone say his name. Have you seen him today? Travis?
Yeah, actually. He came to see Charley, but the doctors were still looking at her when he got here. He dropped these off and left.
She motions to the vase sitting between us. I notice now that a small note is tucked in amongst the flowers. Written in remarkably beautiful penmanship, it reads, "Welcome back. Love, T."
I thought about asking him to stay, to wait for Charley, but I didn't really know how.
How do you mean?
It was just... I didn't know what to say. Hey, Travis, I know I spent the last decade hoping you didn't murder my sister, but thinking you probably did and all that, But since she's clearly alive, why don't we just let that go and grab some coffee while we wait? How's your life been? I've been good.
Once again, Sydnie's calm exterior begins to crack. She seems to be shaking slightly as she has her hypothetical conversation with Travis. She places her head in her hands and breathes deeply for a moment, attempting to regain her composure. She looks up at me, then at Charley, and sighs. Don't you think you're going to have that conversation at some point, as unpleasant as it is?
Yeah, I know. I just feel like a terrible person. I shouldn't. There are plenty of people who've treated him way worse than I have over the years. I tried to be his friend, honestly, but I couldn't do it. He probably hates me.
For what it's worth, I didn't get that impression when I talked to him.
Great.
How has your mom been taking this? She must be relieved.
Oh, I haven't told my mom yet. I don't think it would even register if I did tell her.
But this is something she should probably hear from you, don't you think? Before she finds out from someone else?
I don't think that's going to happen. When Chief Nellis called, he told me he was doing his best to keep it quiet. At least until we know more. He doesn't want a repeat of the whole news thing.
She's going to have to find out eventually. It should probably be from you.
So you're a therapist now?
No, of course not. Sydnie turns to me, scowling, with a look in her eyes that can only be described as rage. After a brief moment, her face softens. The fury in her eyes begins to fade. She looks away, embarrassed. I let out a long breath that I didn't even realize I had taken. I feel so stupid and guilty. She's right. I've let myself cross a line that I know full well I should have avoided. Why? So I can try to make things happen the way I think they should?
I'm sorry. You were just...
No, I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have... I'm stopped by something I never thought I would see. Charley Cooper begins to cry. I don't say anything. Something tells me that this is the first time Sydnie has let herself cry in a long time. After a few minutes, her crying begins to subside. I hesitate before asking, "Are you okay?" Sydnie wipes her tears on her sleeve. She looks down at the floor.
No, but I will be. I really wish my dad was here right now.
We sit in silence for a few minutes. Tears continue to roll down Sydnie's cheek onto the floor. I sit quietly, thinking about the best way to proceed with this interview, eventually realizing that this interview probably shouldn't have happened in the first place. I sigh and move my hand towards the stop button on my recorder when I'm distracted by a noise, the sound of sheets moving. I look towards Charley's bed. Oh my God. Sydnie looks up. Charley, who has been lying completely still since I've arrived, is tossing and turning on the bed. Slowly, her eyes begin to open. Sydnie immediately leaps out of her chair and goes to Charley's side. She looks back at me. I'll go find someone. I quickly stand and run out of the room and towards the nurse's station. Sydnie remains with Charley. Groggily, Charley looks around the room. She opens her mouth to speak.
Hey, it's okay.
Charley jumps slightly at the sound of Sydnie's voice and turns towards its source. For the first time in 10 years, Sydnie and Charley Cooper look each other in the eyes. Charley's expression changes from one of confusion to one of realization as she begins to recognize the tear-soaked face in front of her. Sydnie lets out a pained laugh as the tears come once again, then smiles as she says,
Hey, sis.
Night Falls, California is a production of Night Falls Media. Episode 2, The Bridge, was written and directed by Robert F. Wilson and Alexander Greig, with original music by Tyler Tingey. This episode features Robert F. Wilson as Scott Sinclair, Alexis Ross as Charley Cooper, and Ken Osborne as Richard Nellis. Want to know more? Visit nightfallsmedia.com, where you can find links to our social media, new episodes and new shows, merchandise, and more. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. For the price of one coffee per month, you can get early access to future episodes, exclusive merch, and behind-the-scenes content. Visit patreon.com/nightfallsmedia to learn more. Thanks for listening.